Let's start, and maybe our discussion will, call the other people to join us. So, welcome and thanks to all the audience here, and thanks to the experts who have joined me here on the stage in the panel. So, I am here as more like an industry observer. While these are all, the core players from the industry, I'll try to gather and exchange knowledge with them for the benefit of the larger audience, and let's get whatever the useful insights we can from these experts. So the simple thing, let's keep it more relevant and easy to grab and understand for the audience. I want to highlight on two, three key points since the topic is about the resilient supply chains for the Indian CV industry. So we'll focus on how much of a self-reliant are we at this moment, and I want each of your individual perspectives about the overall industry and maybe a point about your own firm, uh, whether it's like 50% localization achieved or 80% localization achieved, and are you planning to increase it further, whatever. And then broader level, as I said, for the overall industry, what is your opinion? Whether the industry is like 50%, 40%, etc. Then the second thing is, if we want to achieve 80, 90 plus, like almost like 100% localization in India, what things are required? Whether it is technology, infrastructure, government support, anything that is required, or any creation of ecosystem, in which certain types of participants are required. Then the third thing is, for achieving that ecosystem, what are the challenges we are facing? So these are the three themes or the points I would like to discuss.
Your question is on conventional ICE vehicles or electric?
See, I still keep EVs as a peripheral segment, to be very precise, because all of us know that we are 90% dependent on imports, and talking about self-reliance in that segment is too early. Maybe at least another 3 years down the line, or realistically 5 years down the line, if we think about that, it makes sense. Uh, the the suitable thing is the conventional fuel vehicles, and the emerging alternate fuels like E20, E30, whatever we are looking in the next 2 3 years to come, and the other alternate fuels like the bio CNG, etc., that are becoming mainstream, and the government is also aggressively pushing. So let's take this segments as a realistic thing. So let me start with you. How you want to hear?
Uh, Thank you for having me here. I represent SML Mahindra and Mahindra Trucks and Buses. Uh, as far as trucks and buses industry is concerned, I don't think localization is so much of a challenge in the conventional ICE vehicles. I would say we have more than 90% of localization. There is no direct import that we have. Whatever imports are there are tier 2 imports, and specifically in the area of electronics, which is like engine ECU chips. So a lot of companies are now, the ECU manufacturers are assembling the ECU in India. Some of them are still importing. And whoever is assembling in India, they are still importing the electronic parts which get assembled on the ECUs. So we have a dependence on imports in that particular category. And apart from that, we have sensors which are still imported. Some of them come from China. Some of them get routed through Germany. We have imports in sealings, with critical sealings which still come from China. Then there are critical bearings where we still have dependence on China. So ABS ECU kind of parts, engine ECU, these are the power electronics part kind of items, and critical suspension items which are tier 2s are where the dependencies are still there, because these are precision manufacturing parts which are still not developed in India. And you talked about what kind of government support we are looking at. I think precision manufacturing, while government push is there, I don't think we'll get any PLI benefit over there, because this is not advanced engineering. This is still conventional engineering. But precision manufacturing, people will need to invest. We need suppliers to invest in this particular industry to deliver us the right quality and the right precision that we are looking at. Government support, may still not be required, but still we need industries to invest in this area.
Your take, Vijay?
So I'll be the odd man out in the series and talking about representing JSW Green Tech in all EV segment. So a bit difference of opinion while you say it's a 4-year or the 5-year down the line story for the localization and also all per se it's round the corner now. And the maximum in EV, I just put some few numbers for the reference that for the EV, unlike in the IC segment, you cannot cross 80%. The max is the 80% you can go the localization. Remaining the sales and other things will come as it is coming from the other part of the world. But 80% is the way of life now. It is round the corner. All policies, if you go through like PME Drive or the PLI speaks about the localization. And while in this particular segment where you do not have any direct customers, you are largely driven by the institutions or the government institutions which ask and which calls for the localization completely. You go through their schemes, you go through their norms, they will ask for the localization if you want to be a part of the bid or want to be a part of business. So it's round the corner. And at just few more inputs from the JSW Green Tech point of view, there are buses while reach to the market or while reach to the places, they will reach to the 79% of the localization, barring cells, each and everything will be localized, including the power electronics. Where we are looking for, we are developing, we have gone developed, further we are developing, all within the JSW flagship, and it will be complete localized, and by the time we reach to the market, we'll be the 79% localized from this point.
Okay. Like since you said you are the odd man out, specifically since we have this EV car case. When we talk about all the other components and the power electronics, I think somewhat similar challenges like what Ritesh said apply to you also, dependent on the imports. But we all know that 40% of the EV cost, and sometimes even more if we are looking at a very long range commercial truck or commercial bus EV. So the battery cost might be coming to like 50%. And that we all know that we are just importing all the battery cells and all, we're just packing them and creating the final battery packs. So it's not necessarily localization, as we all know. If even that has to come, then I would probably consider such much localization to have happened in India. Because as long as 50% is out of your scope, whatever you play in that 30%, saying that under 20% to वैसे भी depend करना है, it's not a localization achievement. So when you achieve that 80-90% of the battery right from the scratch, maybe you get the critical minerals, you start creating the battery cells, packs, and then move forward in the value chain to create the final product. So it makes sense of achieving a total reliance or 80% localization.
So I'll say from the battery cost point of view, yes, it goes to 30-35% to the overall vehicle cost, not the 50% of the vehicle cost. And barring in from that 30-35%, you will have 50% from the peripheral components. You can have it here only. So remaining sales, yes, it's a challenge. It's an industry a bit far target to reach on, and the ecosystem to come up to have sales localization here. That's a far a distance job to do. Mm-hmm. But I'll say the out of that battery cells, the 50% can be localized. Suppliers, ecosystem, everything is available here. It's only the some support from the OEM or the some support from the government policies. They can come, and I tell you, you mark my word, barring down the 2 year down the line, it will be commodity like the other IC parts. And the localization of other parts, I'll thanks to my IC friends. They keep on doing, and we are harnessing on those lines.
Thank you. So you take Amey.
I won't really talk about a percentage of localization because it would really vary in a company like us depending on the applications. But I would echo with my friends here, especially in terms of the challenges we continue to see, the tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers. And even more so on the precious metals which really get into those. Because there has been a focus on localizing a lot of tier 2, tier 3 supply chains as we have seen the COVID kind of disruptions in the past 5 years. But still, there is no mechanism for us to battle with the monopoly the Chinese players have on the raw material supplies. And if you really ask me what kind of support we need from the government, that is definitely the one which the industry would heavily benefit if there is a mechanism by which you are able to find more processing capabilities of those raw materials within the Indian territory. So precisely, I think that's where all of us are really keen on looking at the sustainability of the supply chain or the strengthening of supply chain, avoiding the geopolitical shocks or the whims of a few people essentially driving the changes in the whole industry here.
So, Mr. Sinha, your perspective, please, before I go to Ford, which is yet in the passenger vehicle segment mostly.
Hello. Yeah. Good evening. And before we take this question, I will just tell you that I am a part of a Atmanirbhar Bharat team for sourcing group in Siam, and there we have a target given by government to do a localization. So 3.5 years back, we have taken a target as a automotive industry that localization of further 10% enhancement in localization. And then after 3.5 years, when we went to the ministry and then we said that this much localization we have done, then Piyush Goyal has shown a report that your import content is still the same. So then we tried to explain him that earlier what we were importing specialized steel, we were importing a lot of casting, hardwares and some mechanical items. But now over a period of time, what has happened is that the technology has shifted. Maximum passenger cars have shifted to a automatic transmission. The import of automatic transmission has gone up. Sunroof, the vehicle with the number of vehicles with the sunroof has gone up. So we have to see that the localization for a commercial vehicle or a passenger car, we work on a localization, but when the technology shifted, again our imported content goes up. So the localization drive, whatever OEs are working, we are working once we start importing, then the economy of scale comes, then our local suppliers start working on localization of those parts, then we do localization till another technology comes, and then again import content goes up. So the problem which we are presently facing is that the critical mass, when we do something localization, we can divide import content in two parts. One where Mother Earth is not blessed India with those minerals, like when we have moved from BS4 to BS6, the content like platinum, palladium, rhodium, this has gone up. The substrate which we are importing from outside, that has gone up, that has increased our import content. But the technology part, where the electronic technology is there, other technological parts are there, or a comfort or luxury related items are there. There we can work, we can see that we work with the OEMs, OEMs can work with the suppliers, and in advance we can work on the localization of those parts, which is something right now missing. We are on a catching up mode. That's why our import content goes up, come down, again goes up, come down. So this is something where we have to work.
So your take, Balaji.
I think we are in the right time when the government has announced yesterday about Abhaya. It is basically Bharat Udyog Awas Yojana, which means the government has already established 100 plus plug and play supplier parks, which means a kind of a green signal for the tier 2 and tier 3, where they can't invest much on the initial stage on the capital and other expenses. So when we look into the landscape of the MSMEs, the main areas where the OEs can support the sub-tiers are mainly on co-investing on the capital expenditure. When the volumes are more fluctuating, when there is no committed volumes, the suppliers will not be able to commit directly for one OE. They look for opportunities when the OEs can share the capacity. So co-investing on the capital expenditure is one area. Second one, the biggest expenses is on protecting the raw material sourcing. When the raw material sourcing, the big players, if they can consolidate the raw material pricing from the major steel mills or casting alloys, it is almost like how Ford currently works is, we directly connect with the steel mills or the aluminum foundries, and then get into a kind of an economical price correction, what price we are going to buy it, so that the tier 1 or tier 2 who is manufacturing the component doesn't take the hit of price fluctuation. The price volatility is not hit. They are not taking the hit. So it's a very big relief for the MSMEs who support continuously the OEMs. Even if the raw material is going to be common across the OEMs, it is going to be a big support for the MSMEs. Third one is more about technological support. Many cases, the tier 2 and tier 3s are looked in such a way that they don't have much kind of audit systems. So the tier 1s and OEs can come up with a support supplier development plans, which is more about supporting them in terms of the people who are already retired from the OEs. They can be placed sharing their knowledge with the suppliers on how the process improvements can take place. So these ventures can bring in a better supplier ecosystem in a place where the OEs will get benefited directly, and on the other side, the suppliers will also be more profitable. Thank you.
From whatever all the speakers' inputs they've given, you are saying that the electronics parts, we are still dependent largely, at least for now, and maybe once more vendors or maybe local players gain competencies, there will be some control in that. But when we look at the core materials, whether I'm talking about the metals or the steels, alloys, aluminiums. I'm not talking about the rare metals which go into the engine or exhaust and other things that you mentioned. I'm talking about the core, the frame, whatever the body materials, whether it is plastics, carbon fibers, etc. These we have a very well established ecosystem, is what I understand. But there are cases where I hear still the component suppliers are importing those parts and supplying to the OEMs here. One example I saw here itself, I saw a vendor outside. They were flaunting their radiator fans, which they are saying we imported from Europe, Italy. So I told him, what is the need to import these plastic fans from Italy? They said these are some material, something. I'm not sure if that is true. So are there still some pockets of such forced import by some OEMs for whatever reasons? If so, why?
See, as far as possible, we avoid imports. There was a time pre-pandemic where China sourcing was the flavor. That was to have a cost reduction advantage because China sourcing would always be cheaper. So that was the flavor at that time, that you develop sources in China, import as much as possible from China. Forgings, critical forgings. We started importing tires also from China at a much lower cost than India. But post-pandemic, we unlearned all those things. We understood that China sourcing is not so good. And that's why we decided on local sourcing as much as possible. And that's why last 5 years, whatever kind of imports we were doing outside, there's been a significant push to localize in India, to the extent that many of our tier 1 suppliers who were importing parts from China or elsewhere, from Germany, especially the precision manufacturing parts, there's been a lot of push to get those parts localized in India. So it is not at all a flavor with the OEMs currently to import. One is the exchange rate is going up. It is not at all viable to do any forced imports, because it doesn't make sense at all. So whatever we are importing at the moment is actually not available in India. He talked about PGM. PGM is not available in India. Substrates, not available in India. So OEMs today, I think, are importing only those things which are not available in India. Or the tier 1s also are importing those kinds of child parts which are not available in India. I don't think there is any forced import unless there are some boutique items which somebody might be flaunting, which is of a new technology, and they might be flaunting those kinds of new technologies which could still be coming from outside. If you migrate to new powertrains and all, yes, since the scale is not there, we might be still dependent on some imports. But as far as the conventional stuff is concerned in terms of powertrain, or even suspension items. Idea is to localize as much as possible. And even if you are importing items, the push is towards having dual sourcing and not rely on only one source for imports. So that is the sourcing philosophy we carry.
So I'll say the supply chain still remains largely in case of EV from China. What change now we are witnessing or we are about to working while on the EV segment is the in portion you can work upon and partially we can localize this. Today the PCB boards can be developed in India, PCB assemblies can happen in India. So what we can de-link from the sourcing, especially from China, as rightly mentioned my friend, the semiconductors and chips continue to be outsourced, globally outsourced. Not only China, from the other part of the world also. But yes, those assembly, the critical operation now has started in the Indian automobile industry. The suppliers are gearing up, and with the co-investing with them and with the some capacity working with them, we can further increase on the localization. But yes, key remain the localization from the India market to avoid all the geopolitical issues, all the supply chain, all the forex. Every now and then, every issue comes, it is hitting the automobile supply chain. So key remain the complete localization. However, it will go in steps. So today we are on the assembly part or the SMT operation. Now it is very earlier. Finding a SMT supplier or a supplier with the SMT operation was the difficult job. Today, now there are array of suppliers available with the expertise they are available. So those operations and though value addition in the India market can be done, but of course semiconductors and chips will remain the part of the global sourcing.
Your take, Mr. Sinha.
Localization. So I'll just tell that one of the vehicle which our V commercial vehicle, which is a joint venture between Volvo and Eicher. So there we got one of the vehicle which is completely imported. We have done the localization of that particular vehicle and we have achieved almost 80% of the localization, and some part which are not available in India because of the raw material of that is not available. So our experience of localization is that Indian suppliers are quite competent, especially in the basic technologies like casting, forging, sheet metal, rubber, plastic. So there you will not find any issue. If you want to develop a complete cabin, so complete BIW you can develop here. You can critical castings you can develop here. Critical forgings you can develop here. So you have a suppliers who are now catering from here to globally, especially in these technologies. So the major challenge which is left behind is only the electronic parts. So in electronic parts also over a period of time of last 3-4 years, you will see that lot of assembly work has already started happening in India, especially in ECUs, especially in sensors. So basic chip and other semiconductor which our tier 1 suppliers are still importing. That also Indian government is putting a lot of effort there to under their scheme of Atmanirbhar Bharat and giving a lot of PLI benefit to the lot of suppliers to putting up a chip manufacturing plant in India. So though I see that in coming time that those parts also will be a localized one in India. So I see that there is a huge thrust from both OE side, supplier side as well as the government side. So there is an ecosystem which is getting created for doing a localization, because you can see that impact of dollar going up on our vehicle cost, also on the inflation, other things. So I can see a lot of sincere effort is there to do a localization of the parts.
Your take, Mr. Abhay.
Actually, the example which you gave was perfectly hitting the nail on the head. Because why would someone choose a product with a particular material? And in my mind, the real procurement work not begins when it comes to a purchasing manager to find a supplier, but it begins on a piece of a drawing board. Typically, historically, we have seen a lot of engineers always looking at, hey, this material, this process has given the best results. I'll just use that in my design and apply it, and then procurement will find a way to localize it. And a lot of us as procurement people, we end up having difficulties in finding the right skill set, right technical capability, or even there is an IP. There may be a technical capability, but there is an IP which stops us doing that work. And I think that's where fundamentally the mentality has to change, even in the engineering world who design the product, to find the alternative material, alternative process, and put it on a drawing so that the purchasing managers can really find a set of suppliers who can localize the product at a cheaper price at a more sustainable output level. And I think that's where we want that mentality to continue to change. It has changed quite a lot from what it used to be 10 years ago, but still it's a natural human tendency. You always want to choose a path of least resistance. And when you see that this is something which is available on the shelf, it's been used by my competitor or someone else in the industry, why don't I choose that? And that's the piece where things will evolve over the period.
You?
Yeah, in terms of localization, I would give an example of how Ford Ranger started going back in 1970s. Most of the components in Thailand, when they started to build it, were imported from UK. And then they were also building it in a different plant. And slowly, when the tie-ups changed in 1980s, it was with Mazda, the platform changed. And the trust with the local suppliers started building up. So it's also a kind of a time when the suppliers are evolving or upgrading themselves, comparing themselves with the global players, global OEs. There are many examples where we can say suppliers are looking for flagship programs like a Ford Q1. When a supplier says that I'm a Q1 flagged supplier, it brings in a trust in the market, while other OEs are looking for a specific supplier who is kind of an expertise on a specific commodity. So it's more about how suppliers are also coming up and then equipping themselves with the technology and then stepping up in terms of adopting to the specifications which are available in India, as well as meeting the global standards. So when that is coming up, the scenario is shifting in terms of why we have to buy this from an imported source. So why can't we localize with the supplier who is already within our region? So it is almost like when it was in I would say post 2010, it was almost like 80 plus it is localized when the Ranger was compared to 1970s. So how far the local supplier is equipping themselves and upgrading to the next level, meeting the global benchmarks, defines how the OEs can reduce the cost of the component or the overall vehicle. So that's one example which I thought of sharing here.
See, I wanted to share a perspective which I got from one of the parallel events of, some other participants from our ecosystem. So this is from ACMA kind of events, where we see mostly the tier 2s, tier 3s as participants. So there the complaint, from their side or pain expressed from their side was that most of the OEMs, be it PV, be it CV, whatever it is, they bring their sister concerns or their favorite tier 1 suppliers from whatever the country they are, or if they are even local manufacturers, they build one tier 1 supplier network and they nurture them, they develop them, share very integrally all the design and technology evolution. But that hand-holding and nurturing do not go beyond the tier 1. So the tier 2, tier 3 are left to fend for themselves. And in most cases, they are not privy to the plans and, whatever the production or sales and other things that these tier 1 and OEMs have planned. So they end up, either with extra stock or shortage. Then, they are lost out on the order and somebody else takes up this. And then for all the financial things, they are dependent on government schemes, etc. While the OEMs or the tier 1s do not support. So this is a common complaint and the pain point I have heard. I genuinely ask, your honest opinion on how much of it is true, or can something be done to reduce that so that more confident and more resilient local ecosystem can be built?
What you said is mostly true. Our supply chain is probably not so not so much of a healthy condition today because of the precise problem you mentioned. While at tier 1 level there is a lot of integration with the OEMs, because they get a direct communication from the OEMs on their plans and all the activities which are happening. They attend the supplier conferences. There's a lot of relationship building which happens. But down the line, their communication to their tier 2, tier 3s are not so strong. Not that it is a prevalent practice across the industry. I have seen some good tier 1s like Brix India, Bosch, multinational suppliers who have actually built in a good ecosystem also. They have also done it. I have attended one of their conferences, the tier 1s having a conference, wherein they have actually shared their plans of how they are expanding, what is the business they are getting. But such tier 1s are less. Many of the tier 1s have actually not connected with their supply chains so strongly so that the tier 2s and tier 3s are able to better in terms of their technology, their capabilities. That's not really happened. But slowly, as the push is coming from the OEM side, the tier 1s are increasingly feeling the necessity to create a stronger tier 2, tier 3 at their end. Because the OEMs are not forgiving in nature at all. If the tier 1s do not build a strong supply chain down the line, their own supply chain, they risk losing their business. We've seen the last quarter what has happened. When suddenly the CV industry moved up, most of the companies actually failed in delivering. They were the best suppliers, where the entire CV industry was actually dependent on, be it the brakes, be it the suspension items, or be it certain engine items or compressors. All these items, if you look at it, are actually concentrated amongst a few tier 1s. And all these few tier 1s actually failed because they've not developed their tier 2s and tier 3s properly. And they've understood it now that one thing is they've not created capacity because CV industry actually did not perform the last few years. We actually crossed the F19 levels just now. So there was a fear of investment and whether the investment would get the right ROI. So they have not invested, the tier 2s, tier 3s have not invested. But wherever tier 1s have actually failed us is, one is they did not have the capacity. And the second one is, they're actually tier 2s and tier 3s have actually failed them in delivering the child parts at the right time. And that's why the necessity is on the tier 1s to actually develop their tier 2s and tier 3s in a very responsible manner, share the technology, encourage them to invest in different areas where it is required, handhold them in capability building. It is their responsibility. The way the OEMs take the responsibility of doing it with the tier 1s. It cannot be actually, that responsibility cannot be given to the OEMs to do it. It is the tier 1s who have to do it. It is their responsibility to do it.
Okay. So just to add on to that, so when you said, OEMs cannot take the responsibility of nurturing the tier 2, can they at least give the visibility to the systems that they are sharing with the tier 1s? Does that, have any critical, challenges for the OEMs? Maybe, the tier 2, tier 3s can log in or have access about how the progress of the production or the sales distribution is happening, so that they know what parts, they might be actually expected to supply, as per the going trend.
Yeah.
So is it a challenge for the OEMs to give that sharing of information?
It is a challenge for sure. Because earlier, I will tell you, while we have a supplier portal, it was a one-way communication which would happen. OEMs would communicate their plans to the tier 1s. OEM would not know what is the visibility in terms of what is the difficulty they have in supplies. Post-pandemic, we felt this necessity to create a visibility in the supply chain. And but that visibility, we were able to have directly with the tier 1s. And we were dependent on the tier 1s to give us a visibility on what is the issue that they are having on the tier 2s. But again, the number of tier 2s and tier 3s are so many, it is very challenging for the OEM to directly interact with the tier 2s and tier 3s. And that is why that the responsibility has to go through the tier 1 only. What we were encouraging the tier 1s is to share with us their commitments. And when they were sharing the commitment, what was expected from the tier 1s was to go deeper into their supply chain and tell us where the difficulty was in terms of supplying us the parts when we are sharing the long-term forecast with them. But yes, it is really challenging to go directly to the tier 2s because the number of tier 2s, tier 3s are very high.
Mr. Sinha, what is your take on that?
Tier 1 and tier 2. Actually, if you
So
see,
can the OEMs, do the nurturing of the tier 2, tier 3? If not nurturing,
Actually-
can they at least create a channel of, visibility from their level to the tier 3 level?
Actually, this all depends on total cost of ownership from tier 1 side. Because tier 1 is right now concentrating only on the part which they are supplying. The backward integration of their supply chain is really in a pathetic situation right now. Because whenever there is the way he shared, there is an increase in the volumes, they start saying that this supplier doesn't have capacity, this supplier doesn't have capacity, and end of the day, it's OEM who is suffering. And if you see the tier 1 and the number of tier 2s, the OEM doesn't have that much bandwidth go and educate those tier 2. So it is a tier 1 who has a prime responsibility of percolating the culture which he is learning from the OEMs to their tier 2 suppliers. Because only then we will have a resilient supply chain. And whenever the way we are developing with them, we are having a complete APQP program and other things, at least some percentage of that they have to deploy at their tier 2 level. Otherwise, what will happen that it is something like drawing basically develop होके आ गया ना, हमने उसकी क्वालिटी स्टैंडर्ड के ऊपर काम किया, उसके साथ में neither we work on the what all capacities he have and what all problems he can create, what is the ownership pattern at that tier 2 supplier level. So all these things need to be improved, because now the way reliability and durability requirements are there in the field with the customer, changing supplier is not that easy. Even at the tier 2 level, changing supplier will not be very easy, because we have faced lot of issues in the field when we have dig down what we understood that 3 days back or 2 months, say 2 years back, he is buying this particular seal from this supplier, now he has changed to this supplier. So all these things, small changes now needs lot of validation. So now whenever we have to deploy a supplier at a tier 1 level or tier 2 level, the comprehensiveness need to be there. Otherwise, we are going to keep facing the problems of quality, delivery, and all these things turn up into the last cost. So it's as far as I am concerned, or we are concerned as a OEM, that we always feel that the tier 1 has to take a larger role in development of tier 2.
So, Mr. Amey, they are blaming or putting all the onus on tier 1s like you. What is your take?
Yeah. I think when the tide comes, every boat rises. So it's not that one industry sees the boom. Right now we are talking about CV numbers, but all the other relevant industries where these same tier 1s, tier 2s and tier 3s are supplying are also seeing a similar manufacturing boom. Okay. And that's where whatever we say in terms of demand forecasting and communication, it consistently needs a solid footing and improvement. And like Mr. Ritesh, he was saying, it's not one-way communication, it's both ways. Because think of it like a butterfly effect. If you don't even have a single bolt, you can't build an engine, you can't build a truck. So essentially, one smallest link in your supply chain can screw up the whole process. So from that perspective, definitely the early indicators in the market that needs to come from the front end, from the fleets to OEMs to the whole channel. And at the same time, there has to be a transparent communication back from the tier 3s to 2s to 1s and to OEMs ultimately in terms of their ability to uplift the capacity, how quick, in how much short period they can, especially when the tide is coming. If it is a particular industry, it's fine. But even within the automotive industry or a commercial space, why would the demand go up? The reason is either there is a financing which is cheaper for the fleets where they can afford to buy more, or there is more movement which is going to happen because the overall country is growing at a faster rate. So ultimately, it not just drives the first fit demand, but it also drives the aftermarket demand. And typically, OEMs tend to forget about that aftermarket demand signaling to the supply chain. And we are only looking at a pie of the growing demand, which is in the first fit space. Okay. So that's where that combination of a right communication across the channel from both the perspectives is super useful in my mind.
So, Mr. Vijay, now I want to ask the popular claim that EVs have very few parts as compared to the conventional vehicles. So which means, you have lesser number of vendors and maybe most of them are tier 1 and very few tier 2. So is it possible for EV manufacturers to create this seamless communication and nurturing up to the tier 2, and that can set an example for whatever the share of the EVs or all the manufacturers which are building in this system? Is it possible for the EV manufacturers at least to take the lead in nurturing up to tier 3 level?
So I'll say, irrespective of the numbers of suppliers or the supplier partner, the communication should be there, and so far last 5 minutes we are speaking the quality of communication and the efficacy of communication up to the tier 2 and tier 3 level. While I tell you the environment, while working on the OEM side, what we focus on the final product like vehicle and all. So our wish to penetration up to tier 2 and 3 is also less. What we require or what we suggest to our supplier, the way we are communicating to our first interface, which is the tier 1, and the way we are communicating, that should particulate to the tier 2 and tier 3, the changes. And the way we are asking or we are migrating to a new program or any new program or any new quality, the forums we have, the way we communicate, or the way we engage, they should also engage their supplier. You please understand, while working with the OEM, the tier 1 will have a different grade. Tier 2, tier 3, saying grade will go down is a wrong word, but I'll say, okay, the status quo of those tier 2 or 3 will not remain same. So the tendency from tier 1 to handling tier 2, tier 3 also will remain like this. So that should be eliminated. The rightly mentioned here, each and even the last bolt, it is important to build the entire vehicle. So it's the same manner and the same quality and same efficacy, it should go to the tier 2 and tier 3. While EV, it's much more complex because so many global guys are there. So largely communication with them, I tell you, it's a huge task. And it has to be in practice while communicating such supplier in this. So we work on the frequency and we work on the efficacy of the communication in very much. Of course, when the localization will happen, the supplier will also grow. So that challenges with the global which we are facing today will also happen in the domestic or the Indian automobile side.
So Balaji, you are part of the global sourcing program, whatever the visibility. Are there any things that Ford is doing different than what we have heard here to extend the visibility and nurturing to the tier 3 level? Are you aware of such things? Can you share any insights?
Yes. So it's a really a need of the heart, this question, because when there is no doubt the tier 1 is responsible. I echo whatever the leaders have told. But beyond the tier 1, the visibility is always, it will go down when we go to tier 2 or tier 3. So that is where we call it as a kind of an entire mapping, where a supplier, a tier 3 or a tier 4, who could be a heat treatment supplier or a plating supplier, he could be a supplier for multiple OEs. When there is going to be a hit for the tier 3 or tier N, how my system is going to reflect the wave, the tide that is going to come up. So the systems have to speak with each other, the OEs and the tier 1 systems, if not to tier 2, where the tier 1 can able to proactively have a kind of a frequent reviews in terms of what's happening in the ground, and then reflect that back into the tier 1 system, and then the OE will be knowing it. So we have a kind of a risk management or risk assessment teams who monitor this all over the week, round the clock, to have a feel of what is happening. At least the critical suppliers, the raw material suppliers, the special component suppliers, the rubber manufacturers, the sealant suppliers, the gaskets, who are very vulnerable, who can also have an impact across the other OEs in case if they are going to go down. So by taking the input from the tier 1, we can able to have an assessment in terms of what is going to happen for my line 3 weeks down the lane, and then see whether can I able to do any change. Is my line able to accommodate the change in the pattern or the change in the frequency of the output, or is there anything do I need to shift the production to the next month without affecting the end customer? So that is how we monitor and then take call upfront before something hits the system.
So we have been talking about creating a localization aspect here to make self-reliant supply chains for the domestic market. Let's say, if you want to flip the conversation, and make India a reliable, resilient supplier to the global markets, what are the key requirements which probably are missing now? And maybe we can achieve them if there is minor changes in certain things. So, what are your thoughts on that?
This you are asking from the component manufacturer side.
Component manufacturers, even I would say, vehicle manufacturers also, because obviously, after a point of time, we are looking at export markets, not necessarily for the domestic consumption, right? So, in two-wheelers we have done, in three-wheelers we have done, in tractors we have done successfully. To an extent, passenger vehicles also we have done. Commercial vehicles, I have heard about pockets of exports, but not on a large scale. So, if at all we have to achieve that, how can we create that ecosystem, resilient ecosystem, which can cater to the global markets?
So, a very pertinent question, because we are at an inflection point where India needs to start going big on exports. While we've seen car manufacturers already doing it, like Maruti does it at a very large scale. Now Mahindra is also going strong on exports. On the CV side, we've seen Ashok Leyland doing it. On two-wheeler side, Bajaj does a lot of exports. Now, to have a very strong export side, what is important is that the OEM stands on a sound footing. What is important is there's a lot of responsibility when you're exporting. One is that you're exporting into different channels outside. Your reputation is at stake. So one of the biggest points is on quality. You cannot fail on quality when you're exporting outside. That is number one. Number one and the single most important thing for having a good export potential for yourselves and to continue growing higher on that. And to have the right quality, you need to have the right framework in place, the right kind of suppliers to supply right quality of parts to you. Because the kind of liabilities which are there outside if your vehicle has failed are very high. And that is why the supplier ecosystem has to stand up in terms of delivering very high quality parts, very low PPM, right quality standards, right systems. So this is the ecosystem that needs to be in place, because the liabilities are so high when you're exporting outside.
Your take, Mr. Sinha.
Exporting the vehicle, we can divide the countries in a various buckets. Like you have countries like India, all our SAARC countries and nearby countries, where we are already exporting. So there the ecosystem and everything is similar to what we have in India. So there we are competing with others, or rather you can say Indian OEMs have a better market share there. Then it comes the Middle East market or your African markets, and then you have a Latin American market, then you have a European and US market, which are quite developed in terms of technology, in terms of their legislations, their norms, their stringent norms. So all these things. So you have to have a various strategies of going to the various markets. You have to decide your cards very prudently, and like in our case, you can say in we commercial vehicle, we have started making vehicles under Volvo brand, and we are exporting to the countries where because brand creates a very important role in selling the vehicles in that particular country. So the same vehicle, when we are selling into the other like Volvo brand or Volvo's other brands like UD, then those vehicles are selling very good there. Now we are entering into the same market with our Eicher brand. So now we have to create a complete ecosystem. We have to create an aftermarket. We have to create a service network. So all these things, the selling vehicle is not like selling a product one time. It's whenever you are selling a vehicle, you have to ensure its entire life. You are able to give a service. You are able to provide a spare part. You have to provide other things during the life of that vehicle. So all these things going to create a very important role when you are going to export a vehicle. So all these things has to be created. You have to create a complete strategy, and you have to create a complete network in that country. So exporting vehicles from India, it depends upon the OEM to OEMs, what is their long-term plan of going into that particular country. In terms of quality, you can say that Indian vehicles are in some cases, somewhere we are competing, and somewhere we have to do a lot of work. Aesthetically, fit finish is going to create a major role in that. And then the durability and reliability is another factor where we have to work. And then it's the latest technology, contemporariness of your cabin, your vehicle. So all these things are going to create a major role, going to play a major role when you are exporting a vehicle and you are selling a vehicles. But the way will you can say for OEM, the component suppliers, they are already exporting a lot of parts from India. If you say Indian ECMA's export is increasing every year. So we have a good suppliers who are already catering to the various global OEMs. So it is not something that we'll not get a good parts or good technology in India. We have to change our mindset in terms of fit, finish and adaptation of a new technology. This is the only thing we have to see, and then we have to see what is our long-term strategy in terms of export.
Mr. Amay, your thoughts? Still, okay, I think we still have 5-10 minutes. We have some buffer time here, I can see, 4 to 4:30. We'll use that,
Yeah, but
5-10 minutes.
if we can move into questions also.
Yes, we will definitely, we want to engage with them, but,
Sure.
1 or 2 questions and then we'll
Sure,
engage with them.
sure. Thank you.
So,
I won't add anything to what Mr. Badri said, but I think quality becomes a table stake, and the whole ecosystem is super important because typically what happens is the asset which we are selling at this point of time has a long service life. Sometimes even if it gets contracted with a government kind of a customer, you have to make sure that you are able to service the asset, you are able to supply the part for those 10, 15, 20 years. So the whole ecosystem, not just in terms of the distribution side, but also in terms of the supply side also needs to be built accordingly. Because as the asset gets older, there are chances of obsolescence of the main frame or the main platform on which it is built, and then it kind of becomes service only demand. So it's a different story when you are looking at the domestic supply for a service only demand versus you are trying to service the external customer, the global customer. So it becomes really tricky from supply chain standpoint, and we can get into the weeds of how to manage on that. But I think that element is super important, and that's where it goes back to Mr. Badri's statement that it's every company's strategy in terms of what they want to export and how they want to export.
one other point I want to ask you is that when we talk about the supply chain control, visibility, and all that, both sides, procurement as well as distribution side, most of the focus I have seen particularly has been from the supply, the sourcing side. So we talk about engaging with the tier ones, and then proactively asking them to engage with their vendors, creating a system, whatever the connected platforms, etc. So creating a virtual, connected, seamless communication system, and saying that our supply chain is integrated, it's visible, transparent. That is, to an extent, okay. Now coming to a real world where now you have to physically get the goods, both from the sourcing side and from the distribution side. So there what I have seen is neither the OEMs, neither the tier ones, even for the finished vehicles, we are dependent on the external transporters. How much ever professional they might be, how much ever FedEx they might be, we're still dependent on them. And there again, they're front facing you. At the back end, they are again using some unorganized transporters. Maybe again tier 1 transporter or tier 2 transporters. And when it goes to the last mile, it's almost like a tier 3 transporters. So in such cases, can there be something that OEMs and tier 1s do to make this physical supply chain more reliable? What are your thoughts?
Pertinent question, because post-pandemic we had the semiconductor crisis, then we had the Nexperia crisis, then we had the rare earth magnet crisis. Last few months we've had transport crisis, driver unavailability, manpower crisis, all kinds of crises have come. But logistics is a big issue now. It is a serious problem which has to be looked into. We do not have real solutions as of now. Fortunately, if you look at Mahindra, yes, we have Mahindra Logistics with us as an organized player in the industry, but they also have their own sets of problems in terms of vehicle unavailability, driver unavailability, those kinds of things. I don't have a real answer to it as to how to approach the solution, because it's a problem to be solved. But yes, de-risking is what we are working on, because these uncertainties are going to stay. The uncertainties in terms, not in terms of just domestic logistics, but even international logistics. We've seen what's happened in Middle East conflict. We need to have, these signals coming in advance so that we can have alternate supply chains built in. So risk avoidance is what we have to work on. International logistics, like developing alternate sea routes in place, so that if something happens in one particular route, the other route comes in. The second part is how do you build, for imports especially, how you can actually source from multiple geographies so that you don't get hit with the crisis if one geography gets affected. Coming to India, again, we tried to do as much of near-shoring as possible to do local sourcing so that you're not affected by logistics so much, so that you can have a milk run system which can take care of local transport issues. But wherever we have pockets of industries which are lying outside in Chennai, material coming from Chennai to Pune, yes, it is an issue. Because we have to several times talk about express freight and supplier telling us that they do not have enough transport available with them. That problem is, we are grappling with it, and we are yet to find a solution to it. Let's hope that as government builds more infrastructure, more highways, dedicated expressways, I think with that, the TAT will come down. And as the TAT comes down, it's going to help us, because it takes 36 hours for material to actually fly in from, move from Chennai to Pune. Can we have dedicated highways which can actually reduce that time? The way the Samruddhi highway is coming in between Delhi and, in that particular corridor, the western corridor, we probably need to have better road network so that the TAT comes down. If the TAT comes down, then the issue of logistics will come down to that extent. That is what I feel. That is one thing, if government further works on it, they have actually been pushing it in the last 10 years. As it develops, probably we'll be able to tackle the problem better.
So on this point, my personal opinion is that depending more on the road transport and again expecting more expressways may not be a long-term reliable solution. Rather, the industry should look forward for multimodal transportation and push for the development of corridors like the DFCs, the dedicated freight corridors which the government has developed in the western and eastern corridor from Delhi to Gujarat and Delhi to West Bengal side. So that kind of things are required even for the South India, this triangle also, and then the crisscrossing in the country. So the rail plus the last mile through road can make a lot of difference as compared to depending on only road, right? Because irrespective of what number of expressways you create, if all the localites in Pune and Mumbai might relate to the long claimed whatever the thing that there's an express link coming up, it will change the life of Mumbai Pune travel. You are facing struggles, you will feel like heaven, all that stuff got toppled in just 2 weeks when similar kind of accidents and toppling of vehicles happened near that express link, and then for almost a day the traffic was stuck and people were forced to go back to the ghat section which they were supposed to avoid, right? So more and more roads only will not solve this problem. Definitely we need alternate modes of transportation and a combination of that. And the other thing is that, like I said, the way OEMs are nurturing the tier 1 suppliers, I think there should be a very strong nurturing of the transportation side of the vehicles also. So the transportation partners, you need to have them hand in glove as a tier 1 partners. You should make them also a tier 1 partner, not as just a service provider, which I unfortunately feel is the most cases. Help them grow in terms of technology, infrastructure, capabilities, vehicles, all that. Then the delivery side also becomes more reliable. So it means not just vehicles, even for the spare parts also, because more and more OEMs are understanding the importance of having a reliable aftermarket supply chain also. Otherwise they will lose the market to spurious and fake products due to the whatever the time and other challenges the customers have, right? So this side also needs to be focused upon by the OEMs. Is my thing. And any additions or contradictions to my thought from any of you?
I'll say addition to it. Like if you compare today the Indian approach in the financial system or the manufacturing system, we are there at either we are crossing the global marks or we are at par with the global standard, barring the one section which is the logistic, where we are not so near to the global practices and all. So although we have started moving in that direction, and which can be evident while looking at the trucks being manufactured today, buses being manufactured today, and when you compare those with the 10 year ago, the way the trucks and buses will be manufactured. Rather, apart from this, now connected solutions are the other where the anxiety or the reliability or the source of information can reach to the real time. So those factors, apart from the infra or the alternate solution which are there, and industry and the supplier fraternity is working on those directions. So,
Any thoughts from you, Mr. Sinha, on this?
The logistic, basically right now, Indian logistic cost is the highest in the world, and a lot of inefficiencies are there. And you can say that already some good people are already entered into the logistics segment, and it is becoming more and more professional. And we see a lot of improvement areas are there. And the way you are seeing multi-mode transportation like railway and other things are also there. But as far as supply chain resilience is concerned, I believe that the visibility of schedules and planning, this is going to be the major key in remain resilient in the market, because sometimes what happens, we are also not able to predict that what is going to happen in next quarter. And when the quarter comes, we say, no, now volumes are going to go up by 40%, 45%, or now the volumes are going down. So all these things are creating a shock in the supply chain. So all these things also we have to see, this can be only done by a proper planning. But in Indian scenario where you don't know when GST is going to reform, all of a sudden GST got reformed in month of September and the volumes has ramped up like anything. So all these things are going to create a trouble, and this is the job, this is the excitement for a purchase person.
See, one thing I would say, GST reduction and ramp up in demand is a positive development, so you cannot complain on that. But if it was supposed to be a negative impact, then yes, we could have, taken it as a affront. The other thing, I'd just like to, put my perspective here is that in terms of the logistics cost aspect, many times I keep hearing that, India's got a lot of logistics cost, Since I also look into this broader ecosystem of automotive, transportation and logistics as a part of my domain expertise, I have a visibility that there are other countries which have got higher logistics cost than India. Now in India, we take into account a total logistics cost considering the domestic as well as international freight forwarding all put together, which people say it's about high, like 10%, 12%. But there are countries like China, for example, where the international logistics cost is very low because their operations are created in cities which are directly at the port or directly connected to the port through express railroads. But if you go to the domestic transportation side of their thing, their as has 20%. Okay? So all that is, the other side is not green always. There are pockets of excellence or differentiation that we need to understand. So as I told, once we have this hand-holding on the delivery side, definitely things will make a lot of difference and more reliable from the component side to the delivery side is what I believe. So now we are ready to take any questions from the audience. 2 to 3 we'll take. Please. Just introduce yourself and if you want any specific speaker to comment on your question, please direct it. Otherwise it can be general question.
So my question is general. And I'm Gulshan Kumar Singh. I'm from JSW Green Tech. So my question is, currently IC vehicles are having 1100 to 1200 chips. And the way we are moving to EV have 3000 plus chips requirement. And in a parallel world, AI, we are investing huge in AI, data storage and everything. So chip market is limited and the requirement is very much high. So how automobile companies, either OEM or suppliers, leaders, seeing this challenge and what we are doing to counter it?
Can I answer on this?
Please.
You're right to the extent that EV vehicles will have a higher dependency on chips, probably 3 times, 4 times or even 5 times. What at Mahindra we have done, especially on the EV cars, I would say. Post-pandemic, we understood that yes, capacities are limited. We need to de-risk the industry to the best possible extent, not completely for sure. So there, what we have done is like we've partnered with the chip makers like NXP or Mobileye. We've actually partnered with them to create solutions for us, and also have an MOU with them so that they would keep an inventory with them, so that if there is a crisis which happens, how do they handle it? At the design side also, what we've tried to do is, with the tier ones, we've asked them to actually have a standby solution in place, so that if one of the solutions gets attacked, they can activate the other solution from the design angle itself, which means they have a design backup ready with another chip maker, another chip of another make, so that can be activated. We've also created some buffer stock at our company, so that with some critical chips, so that if anything happens in the industry, that can be taken care of. But besides that point, when you talked about capacities, they're not that the capacities are blocked. Capacities are still going up. Companies like Bosch have actually created captive capacity at their end. They've jacked up the capacity to take care of the demand outside. And also people like NXP, having understood that EVs are actually exploding, have created capacities that's continuously growing up. So it was a time during pandemic that automotive industry was considered as a not a profitable industry, and that's why the chip making industry was catering more to the gaming solutions and the solutions which are non-automotive, laptops and all, which suddenly boomed up, and that's where the capacity got diverted. But then as the EV industry has gone up, people have realized that yes, capacities need to be dedicated on this front also, and they are creating capacities.
I would like to add a minute on that. See, even before the pandemic has hit, we had done a study for a company called Continental and a couple of other automotive electronics tier ones on the factor of this growing number of ECUs and how to handle it. And I think the industry has already found a viable solution to this. It's called as a domain control unit instead of a ECU. So there are these larger multi-purpose ECUs which cater to more than 3 to 5 functions. So they replace almost like a 10 to 12 ECUs. And by that ratio itself, whatever the 500, 600, 1000 that you're talking about ECUs automatically comes down by 5 to 10 times as we move and progress more. So the challenge of chip shortage, etc., probably might be a thing of past in maybe next 3 to 5 years is my perspective. Yeah. Any other questions?
Good evening all. Myself Sachin. I'm from Mahindra and Mahindra. My question is to all. See, right now we have heard so much about the supply chain resilience, schedules, delivery, visibility. But have you as a OEM or as a tier 1 supplier, do we have that kind of a culture to inculcate the product innovation and the process innovation, right? That will add to the capacity, that will add to this, the lead time reduction. So have such kind of a thought process has been, nurturing in this OEM or the tier 1 so that it can cascade to the tier 1, tier 2, and of course the down the line tier 3. And as far as few years back, I read that our logistic cost is 14% of our GDP. And Germany is the most efficient country in the world, which is having the 8% cost of their GDP for the transportation, because they have used very effective water management as transportation. Okay, I've seen my friends working in Germany, Heidelberg. So they had a very good transportation system through water management. So such kind of we heard that Suzuki or Maruti have used the railways bogies to move their vehicles, right? So such kind of multimodal transportation modes will be explored in the future. What kind of steps that have been taken forward by this tier 1 of the OEMs across the India? Thank you.
So part of it, about the waterways usage, I can answer from my knowledge. In India, we have a couple of functional waterways: western coastal waterways, eastern coastal waterways, and also on the Ganga, there is a small stretch of waterways that is being used. But why it cannot be used, around the year? We have the water shortage and the same water being used for multiple other things. Hydroelectricity, the water is held captive, so you cannot use it in the non-rainy seasons reliably. There are certain countries like China, for example, uses its Yangtze River, which runs through many of these states, especially through its industrial zone of Shanghai, for its waterways. Then we have developing countries like Vietnam, which are blessed with lot of evergreen waterways that they use. So there are some chances of using it, but since we are a largely rain-dependent geography and economy, we don't have perennial water systems that are flowing. So coastal waterways are definitely usable, and organizations are using it, especially for bulk transportation. But for automotive industry, how far it works out, we can evaluate and check it. So the other parts I can leave it to the experts.
I think you talked about process innovation, right? Process innovation, I can relate to some of them. Yes, these are necessary. Like hot stamping is one area which got introduced to India from some of the European companies, Chinese companies. Hot stamping it's actually an efficient process in terms of how you utilize your pressing capacity. So this is one pressing innovation that actually has helped the industry in reducing the number of steps of formation, steel forming, which is avoided. But apart from that, I think automation is the key. Given that manpower challenge is going to stay in India and it's actually growing now, what we need to do is increase the amount of automation, and the way our industry is actually going up, the way the volumes are going up, it justifies the investment in automation. And that probably is key to take out uncertainties, both in terms of manpower unavailability and also uncertainties in terms of dependence on operators for delivering us the right quality. So I would actually encourage all the tier 1s, tier 2s or tier 3s to actually invest in automation to take care of these two particular aspects.
I think
we'll take one more question.
One final question.
Yeah. Last question.
So my name is Ashutosh Nore. I am from Mercedes-Benz India. So it was really a very excellent session. I would say that one of the best session for today's CV forum. My question is, like, while we are talking about this building resilient into logistic and supply chain, so but we have not touched upon any topic of related to AI or digitization. Like for example, when we talk about up to tier 3, just making them also resilient in this. So how digitization or AI can be just implemented not only at OE end but up to like a tier 2, tier 3, so that their scheduling, then MRP cycle and everything that can be effective.
Yes, AI is going to be there because if you see the type of pressure and the workload is there on the procurement guy. So the AI is going to be there and is going to help them. So in our all other organization, Volvo and other also, we have taken an initiative of digitalization of complete supply chain, starting from part development to the aftermarket catering the part. So all these things we are doing a digitalization. We are involving all our suppliers, everything. Like in Volvo already, all our schedules and everything are going through EDI. And we can see the way I said that we have to be a transparency and visibility of the entire supply chain. Only then the pressure will come down, because maximum time what happens that the procurement guy keep on chasing the trucks and he keep on talking to drivers. So all these things are happening. So all these things has to be replaced by AI. It has to be replaced by digitalization. It has to be replaced by the complete automation of the processes, and the redundant processes has to be removed from the entire system. Because right now what is happening, that schedules are going through mail, even though there is a schedule on a portal, but because of stock and inaccuracies in the plant or in the system, you are sending another mail, and then you are chasing the supplier that you have to send schedule as per the mail. So all these things need to be improved, and this can only happen. The future of the automotive supply chain is going to be the digitalization.
See, I want to defend here the automotive industry, or to a large extent the Indian manufacturing industry. None of our companies, even the smaller ones, are never averse to. They are not against digitization. It's just that the level of digitalization and the systems that they use are different, right? So there are tier 3 companies which might be using a small time ERP. Then there is a tier 2 which uses a moderate, or sometimes they might work with the tier 1s for a established ERP. Then we have the OEMs who might have their own international global level of ERP, which might be linked to the tier 1 but not linked to the next levels. Same happens on the distribution side. There's a logistics player who uses their own ERP of a WMS, TMS, whatever it is, which is not connected to the OEM systems, and then it goes on like that. So there are 5 different types of digitalizations existing in a single supply chain, which are not talking to each other, which are not having visibility. So that is the problem we need to deal with. We are not averse, at least what I've seen, the past 20 years, 25 years, India has become very proactive in terms of adapting AI or whatever it is. There was hardly 2 years back, there was a lot of panic about AI. If you see now, right from the school curriculum, they have introduced AI concepts learning. So it's a matter of time, by 5 years, almost everybody will be able to use AI the way it's expected to be used, right? So that is not the worry for the industry. The worry is about integrating the multiple systems and creating a seamless visibility.
I would just like to add to that, and I'm grappling with the precise situation which is there. I moved from car industry to a truck industry, and I felt that probably the supply chain is, the variabilities are so much more in a commercial vehicle industry compared to a car industry. First of all, volumes are lower. In the same line you do HCV, ICV, LCV, whatever kind of vehicles, at least at Mahindra. Every vehicle is different in terms of GVW. All the aggregates are different, so it's very, very difficult to manage the supply chain here. And I was in one more conference earlier, which was about creating connected systems and intelligent enterprises, which was all about adding an AI layer on top of connected systems. And I perfectly echo with you how AI can actually be leveraged to here. So while we have connected systems where we have established MES, what my thinking was, how can I get the MES to actually talk to the suppliers? So as of now, the MES finishes at the shop floor. How do I extend the MES to the supply chain is what we are looking at. He talked about integration, the right thing. We have an ERP system at supplier and we have an ERP system at our place. We built in solutions to talk to the suppliers, but they are more planning tools today. I am looking at having an interactive system wherein the dynamism of the manufacturing during the month gets translated to the supplier, and we have a two-way communication between the supplier and us in communicating sequences to the supplier, getting information from them, having AI agents in the place of the buyers to actually communicate to the sequence to the suppliers. So there is a lot of potential of AI to actually take care of the uncertainties and the amount of NVA we have today in terms of following up with the suppliers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 levels. I think AI is the right solution. That is the way forward to actually take care of so many issues that we have in supply chain today.
Yeah, I think we'll close with this. Any other questions? Definitely are welcome. You can, reach us one-to-one, and we'll be glad to, share our knowledge with you.
Okay, great. So with that, like a picture, everybody.